They were Americans by geography, not by nationality. They were proud British citizens, which is why it took them 10 years of petitioning the king to stop the tyranny before they even considered picking up arms. Well, we have hidden that history for generations, and so we don't understand that everything that I've just taught you is not simply really cool English history. It is the history and the foundation of our Constitution. And because we don't know that, we miss the link that ties this all together, okay? How many of you have heard of the Glorious Revolution of 1688? Don't worry if you haven't. I travel the country and probably less than 1% of the people that I speak to know about the Glorious Revolution of 1688. That is the key, the link to our malignant and pernicious design. Because the Glorious Revolution of 1688 brings to us the fifth document in the genealogy of our Constitution, the linchpin that brings our founders to all of this history. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 was a revolution against James II. James II was the King of England. And he was doing okay until his wife died, and then he had to go get a new wife and start a new family so he could have sons. Problem is, he married a foreign woman from Rome. And I get the feeling she did not really like England very much. Because the minute she stepped foot in Great Britain, she started doing the very same things that malignant and pernicious design started. I say she, but it was actually James, right? You understand that. I don't think James was very fond of wearing the pants in the family. But he started replacing the judges again with judges that were loyal and paid by him, corrupting the court system, enforcing foreign law on the people, oppressive taxation, inserting his men in the churches to enforce his laws and collect his taxes, and taking over the church itself. 5 ministers petitioned the king, because they had the right to petition the king of their grievances, and said, "Your Highness, we are English. Do not force foreign law on us. We are Protestant. Please do not convert us in our own churches. Give us back our churches." Do you know what James did? He arrested them. Charged them with a crime called seditious libel. It says, if you disagree with the king, it is punishable by death. And guess what? Incorporated in this law is a clause that says, truth is no defense. So even if you're right, you're wrong, because it's absolutely forbidden to disagree with the king. These men were imprisoned, and a new revolution was born, the Glorious Revolution of 1688. And what I want to do is read to you some of this document, our fifth document in the genealogy of our Constitution, which just happens to be the English Bill of Rights of 1689. The very Constitution that our founding fathers carried to England to stand against George when he was going the way of James and Charles and John and Henry and William and William. Remember, John Adams said, our fathers purchased this for us. He was saying we don't have to invent this because we carried this liberty with us. It was purchased for us. And we have to know these documents. Listen to this. Whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of evil counselors, judges, and ministers employed by him, did endeavor to subvert and extirpate the laws and liberties of this kingdom. Subvert, remember we know that? Overturn and undermine, right? That word Annihilate means to completely destroy. Can I ask you a silly question? If you completely destroy something, is there anything left? Those are some pretty strong words, are they not? Well, listen. Completely destroy the laws and liberties of this kingdom. I want to point out to you, it says here, whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of evil counselors, judges, and ministers. You realize that one man cannot be a tyrant over millions alone. He's got to have some help, right? Ministers. Maybe czars. Judges, like Alina Kagan and Justice Ginsburg and Sotomayor, maybe. And ministers. How about regulatory agencies? Well, listen to what James was doing that was an attempt to completely destroy liberty. By assuming and exercising a power of dispensing with and suspending laws and the execution of laws without the consent of Parliament. Because they had divisions of government. They had a judicial branch, they had an executive branch, and they had a legislative branch in Parliament. And the king was writing laws and overturning laws and setting aside laws when he had no power to do it. That was the legislative branch's job. I simply have to say to you one thing. Executive orders. Right? No president, I don't care what his letter designation is behind his name, no president has the power to overturn law, to pass an executive order and say, this law is null and void. That is tyranny. It can only be done through legislative process. Well, what about regulations? Regulatory agencies are executive agency bodies. What right do they have to write law? I had somebody tell me they don't write law, they write like regulations. Oh, really? Okay, let me say, if a regulation can take your money, your property, and put you in jail, when is a regulation different from a law? And that is a legislative body job alone. Why? Because the only way you can control the legislative body and keep them from creating unjust laws is through the election process.
And the tool of shame.
Did you elect the director of the EPA? Or any of his agents? Well, there's a lot of lists of grievances against James II. We'll be covering some of them as we go along today. But I want to ask you something. Have you learned something so far? Do you believe that what you have learned is fundamental to the restoration of this nation so far? Can I ask you, do you think that your elected representatives, both on the state and national level, should have to hear this type of education?
Yes.
Personal responsibility time. Who do they work for? They are our employees. So why are we not demanding that they learn this? I was a biochemist in undergraduate school. I worked my way through college for a part-time being a plumber. I thought, I'm a single woman. This is a skill that I'm going to need to have. They're going to pay me to do it. And by the way, I'm cheap. Why would I pay somebody to do something I can do myself? My husband says, no, you're frugal. I said, no, dear, I'm cheap. Do you know the master plumber that taught me would not let me touch a toilet until he was certain that I had the proper training and experience necessary to not mess it up. Can I ask you, why did I have to have more training to touch a toilet than our representatives have to handle our liberty? And the responsibility to man that comes from us. Remember, government derives its just powers from the people. We are government of the people, by the people, for the people. Period. And if we don't take back the power that's been given to us, we'll become a government of politicians, by our state capitals, for Washington, D.C. And that is tyranny. Do you understand now how important it is for us to look to our founders' wisdom to know where to go today? Do you think it's about time we stop ignoring that lamp that guided Patrick Henry's feet? That lamp of history. Don't you think it's about time we really start listening to that oracle of truth, experience that is showing us not only that we could have possibly avoided where we are today if we hadn't avoided all of these lessons in history, but also lays the pathway for us to continue on to the future. You see, we have to find the hope in this. You have now seen 700 years. You have seen 5 major battles in the name of liberty. You have seen every single time people have stood for liberty, they have won. Not only have they won, they've won big. They went from the 1100 Charter of Liberties, a simple promise from a king who had no intentions of keeping it, to a Magna Carta, the rule of the people saying this is how you must do things, to the Petition of Right of 1628, and the Grand Remonstrance of 1641, and the English Bill of Rights of 1689, the very foundation of our nation that brought us the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the greatest human rights statements ever written. No other country can brag about living in a place where all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No other nation can do that. But to whom much is given is much is required. That is why this is the call of our day. The call of our day is to take that stand, to learn from our history. How many of you have heard that those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it? Right? Well, let me tell you something. That's not quite entirely true. History will always repeat itself because there's nothing new under the sun. Human nature never changes. But those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. And it's about time we picked up our history and our heritage, learned from our mistakes, and gave our children something better than we are leaving them right now.
So, she's a powerful speaker. She speaks the truth. Now, on August 1st, 2016, she came to our Lincoln Day dinner. And my representative, my congressman, was a congressman by the name of Tim Walberg, ex-pastor. He prides himself as being counted as one of the most conservative congressmen. Well, she gave a speech, and he got his feelings hurt. And so he waited around until most everybody left, and he decided he'd pick a constitutional fight with this woman. You ever heard the thing, never bring a knife to a gunfight? He didn't even have a knife. What an idiot. He attacked her. He said with 218 votes, he could pass anything. Because she said, what gives you the authority to fund the EPA? Where's that? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 18, which is the enumerated power of the Congress. They can only do what's there. That's what a limited government means. Too many times people read it and go, well, if it doesn't say that we can't do it, no, that's not how the Constitution works. The Constitution tells you absolutely just the things that you can do. If it's not written, you don't have the power. It's that clear. So he told her with 218 votes he could pass anything. Well, Christiane Paul knows the enumerated powers of Congress and where it's at, Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 18. And she said, so you can change the Constitution if you want to. He said, Christiane, with 218 votes I can pass anything. She said, under what authority? He said, by virtue of I was placed there by the people. That's democracy. That's not a republic. That's democracy. Remember, democracies have always been incompatible with liberty. Madison said they're as tumultuous in their lives as they are violent in their deaths. They're transitional governments. They take us from a republic to an oligarchy of socialism. That's what democracies do. In fact, if you read any of the communist leaders and what they said democracy takes us to a social revolution. The social revolution cements communism. They know. And one thing that scared me to death one time is I listened to George Bush give a speech about the great democracy America. Now, when I heard that, I was a little upset because I thought, here's a guy that was the president of the United States, and he doesn't know we're a republic, if he's going to call us a democracy. Or here's something even more frightening. Maybe we are a democracy and he knew it. Maybe we've gone so far from the Constitution and so far from our republic form of government that we are a democracy. If that's the case, that might explain the tumultuousness right now in America, wouldn't it? Now, if that's the case, we're getting ready for a violent death of democracy, which will take us to a social revolution, socialist revolution. That means time is not on our side anymore. We no longer have the luxury of going, I'll get to it tomorrow. We no longer have the luxury of going, well, I missed that election, but I might make it to the next one. We don't have the luxury of time. We are perched upon a precipice, on a knife edge. We can either fall one way or the other. Are we going to fall to the despotism of democracy? Or are we going to keep our republic, as Jefferson said, or I'm sorry, as Franklin said? When he left the State House, a woman walked up to him and she said, so, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us? And he said, Madam, you have a republic if you can keep it. And through the 20th century, since 1913 with Woodrow Wilson, we have not kept it. We have been lulled like frogs in a pot of water, with the heat being turned up gradually over each generation. And that water is almost at 212 degrees. We are close to boiling. Woodrow Wilson wrote a paper. He said he didn't think that the separation of powers in this country should be between the first, second, and third articles of the Constitution, but that there should be a president that embodies the will of the people. National popular vote. Embodies the will of the people, and then has a professional administrative class, all your alphabet soup agencies, that carry out that will unencumbered by the people. See, we've got a dangerous thing that happens in America today. We watch it. I watch it all the time. It's on your school boards. It's in your cities, it's in your counties. How many counties down here in Indiana have,
92.
okay, so you got 92 counties. How many of those counties have county administrators? Can't think of any. We've got quite a few of them in Michigan. We've got 83 counties. How many cities have city administrators?
There's some.
Mm-hmm. Do you understand that's Woodrow Wilson's idea? How many schools have superintendents? Oh, why do you think that is? Because of John Dewey. John Dewey was an ardent socialist. He's the one that set our public schools up on the Communist Manifesto. See, what happens is, I watch this all the time. We've got even in Hillsdale, our city council. They're the elected people. They're the elected representatives of the people. They're the ones that are supposed to be limited by the Constitution and keep the law as servants to the people. But they get into a city meeting, they go, well, we'd like to do this and this. And they look at the city administrator and he goes, well, you can't do A and you can't do B, but you can do C. Well, guess how the vote goes? Nay, nay, yay. What did your elected representatives do? Absolutely nothing but parrot what the professional administrator wanted and told them they could do. Why not cut out the middlemen? Why have an election? Why have an elected board? Just get rid of them. People just hire one person, right? Think of school boards. School boards do the same thing. Oh, I want to run for school board. I see all these people, I want to run for school board. They sit there. No, we want to do this and this and this. And the administrator goes, well, you can't do A, you can't do B, but you can do C. What do? Nay, nay, yay. Right? Why have an elected board? See, we've forgotten that the elected board hires the administrator. So if I was on a school board, I'd tell the superintendent, we want to do this and this and this, and he'd go, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do C. Okay, how much school have you had? You've had 8 years of school? But you're telling me you can't figure out how to do A and B, and that's what we want done? Then turn in your resignation, I'll find somebody who can do the job, if you're not smart enough. See, you work for me, you're my employee. How many people here have been foremen, supervisors, or their own business owners? What would you do if you had an employee tell you, well, I'm not doing that, I can't do that? How long would that employee last at your business? We work construction, we used to have a standing rule, if you fall off the roof, you're fired before you hit the ground. Right? So that administrator would be fired before he hit the ground. Guarantee you that. Our elected boards need to be just that, representatives of us, and they need to serve us, the people, we the people. We the people are the top, not the bottom. Federal government's the bottom. So, Chris Ann Hall's got a lot of good stuff to say. I encourage you to look her stuff up, her and CJ, her husband. They are absolutely wonderful. I've never seen anybody able to argue their knowledge of history and the Constitution. And so I would encourage you to look her stuff up and donate to her ministry. It's really good. So she talked about the 5 genealogical documents. So next week we're going to get into the 1100 Charter of Liberty. And we're going to read that word for word. So we're not going to just know that there's an 1100 Charter of Liberty. We're actually going to read the documents. Because I think that's important, that we read them for ourselves. That we think about them. That we balance that against the truths that we know are truths. And then we decide for ourselves whether they're correct or not. I don't have a problem. If you read the Constitution, you read the Declaration of Independence, if you read those things and you study them, and then you can come back to me and go, I don't agree with them. It's fine. But articulate why. Articulate principles that show different. than the principles that are there. Show me the history that you're basing your opinion on, or that you've based your decision on. See, it's better to teach people how to think rather than what to think. I will not teach somebody what to think, but I'll teach you how to think. I'll teach you how to look into the history. I'll teach you how to balance that against what's happened. And you'll be able to then see for yourselves and make your own minds up. So I happen to think that this is the greatest nation on earth. I happen to think that our founding fathers were guided, divinely guided, to write something that was just shy. The only other thing that was written by man that's better is the Bible. And it was inspired by God too. So I happen to believe that those founding documents were just as inspired, and I think they're genius. The problem is we've been taught to hate our country. We've been taught that all of our founders were white, rich slave owners, which is a lie. Understand, slavery was never an American institution. It was always a British institution. In fact, I will show you in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, where slavery was supposed to be over by 1808. But that Congress failed, just like our Congresses fail today, because we don't use the tool of shame, and we don't always pay attention to the vote, and we need to. Elections have consequences. So, are there any questions over what Chris Ann Hall brought out tonight? Any comments? Who enjoyed what she had to say? Okay, I would encourage you to look up her stuff. It's really good. With that, thank you very much for coming tonight. Be very careful on the way home. And next week, we'll get into 1100's Charter of Liberty, and that document is in this handout that we gave you. So, and there's some definitions there. There's other words. Look, we're going to read a lot of Old English, and I will sound like a babbling fool up here because I will stumble over tons of words because it's not common English. It's not common for us, that English. But remember, words have meanings. The problem is we want to change those meanings, and we shouldn't. We have to understand what the original words mean. One of the big things that you're going to find as we get into here, everybody ever heard of the Commerce Clause? This is where in the 20th century we decided that to regulate Tommy guns, that we bastardized the reading of the Commerce Clause so that the federal government could regulate what they wanted to within the state, because it says that they're supposed to regulate commerce among the several states. Well, if you look in the Webster's Dictionary for regulate back then, it meant facilitate. So when you read the word regulate in the Constitution, words have meanings. And the Constitution is an ancient word that means contract. And in all contract law, if there's a dispute, you have to go back to the original meaning and the original intent of the article. This is something that we have failed to do in the 20th century. So, when we read that, it says that Congress should facilitate commerce among the several states. Completely different meaning today, isn't it, than regulate. So words have meanings. All right. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you next week. Bring a couple friends with you if you enjoyed the class.